All right, welcome. Today we're diving into one of the most significant and, let's be honest, one of the most bewildering works of early Christianity, the Book of Revelation. I mean, this book is packed with profound theology, some seriously radical politics, and just astonishing literary artistry. But for so many of us, it feels like a locked box. And, the scholar Richard Balcom has this great way of putting it. He says that for centuries, Revelation has been the Cinderella of the New Testament. Think about it. Despite all its depth, it's often been neglected by serious scholars. It gets shoved to the side for the Gospels or Paul's letters, just left in the corner, totally misunderstood. So that really gets to the heart of the problem, right? How do we even start to read a book that's famous for being, well, impossible to read? This is where Baucham's work is such a game changer. He basically says, hold on, this isn't some chaotic, incomprehensible puzzle. It's actually a brilliant, intricate design. We just need the right keys to unlock it. Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to walk through Baucham's framework. First, we'll look at why this book has been so misunderstood for so long. Then, we're going to explore the 4 big keys he gives us: its unique literary style, its deep conversation with the Old Testament, its place within the whole apocalyptic tradition, and how it's grounded in the real world of the Roman Empire. And finally, we'll see how these keys open up what Bauckham believes is the very climax of prophecy itself. So let's dive into that first part. You have to understand, for a really long time, especially with critics back in the 19th and 20th centuries, the dominant idea was that Revelation was just a literary mess. They saw it as this clumsy mashup of different sources, all incompetently stitched together by some final editor. Yeah, Bauckham just throws that whole idea out the window. His whole argument starts from this idea that this view comes from a massive failure to actually appreciate the book on its own terms. He argues that Revelation is this incredibly integrated, interconnected whole. It's a work that was put together with such meticulous, careful attention to detail that you can barely find a single accidental word. This isn't an editorial blunder. It's a work of literary genius. And that right there leads us straight to the first key, really getting a handle on its unique literary artistry. See, to read Revelation the way it was meant to be read, we kind of have to unlearn some of our modern literary ideas and really see the specific techniques its author, John, was using. So let's break down what John was actually doing. This isn't just about beautiful language. We're talking about a text with an incredible density of meaning, one that's designed to unfold more and more every time you read it. Its literary style is deeply connected to the interpretive techniques of Jewish scholarship at the time, but it's also absolutely the product of John's own creative genius. He built this entire world of meaning that demands we meet it on its own terms. Okay, this second key is a big one. It's absolutely crucial. The book of Revelation is just saturated with the language of the Old Testament. But, and this is so important, this isn't just a writer kind of seasoning his writing with familiar phrases because he knew the scriptures. It's so much more than that. The key word here, the thing you have to get, is dialogue. He's not just quoting, he's having a very intentional, very disciplined conversation with these older texts. He purposefully alludes to specific passages from the Old Testament, and he fully expects his readers to recognize them, to remember their original context, and to bring that context into their reading of Revelation. The book is literally designed to be read with the Old Testament open right next to it. And what's amazing is he's using actual scholarly methods of his day to do this. A fantastic example is this technique called Gezerah Shava. Think of it like this. It's an interpretive practice where you find 2 different passages in Scripture that happen to share a key word or phrase. You then bring them together and you let them interpret each other. John uses this technique to weave these incredibly rich networks of meaning, connecting prophecies and ideas across the Scriptures in this highly structured way. So you see what this means for us as readers, right? It's not a passive experience. It's an active one. First, you've got to spot the allusion, recognize that phrase from Isaiah or that image from Ezekiel. Then you think back, you recall the original context of that verse. And finally, you get to see how John reuses it, reinterprets it, and ultimately shows how it's being fulfilled in his own prophecy. This is how you start to peel back the layers and get to the deeper message. All right, let's grab that third key and see how this all starts to connect. Revelation wasn't written in a vacuum. It belongs to this whole genre of literature that was super popular back then in both Jewish and Christian circles, known as apocalyptic literature. So yeah, John is definitely using the standard toolkit of this genre, stuff like angelic guides, crazy symbolic visions, journeys up to heaven. But And this is a huge but. He's not just phoning it in. He's not just copying and pasting. Bauckham argues that just like the writer of another famous apocalypse, for Ezra, John takes the conventions of the genre and uses them with an immense creative genius, twisting and developing them for his own unique theological point. Okay, key number 4. This is where we anchor this wild, visionary text back down to planet Earth. To really understand Revelation's relationship with the Roman Empire in the late 1st century, you have to carefully navigate between two really dangerous extremes. Bauckham uses this awesome classical metaphor of Scylla and Charybdis to lay out these two pitfalls. On one side, there's the danger of treating Revelation like it's just a piece of art in a museum, a self-contained object with no real connection to the world. If you do that, you totally miss its power as a prophetic critique of Rome. But on the other side, you have the danger of boiling it all down to just a simplistic complaint letter about society, which completely ignores its brilliant theology and literary genius. So the trick is to keep both of those ideas in your head at the same time. The book's incredible theological vision is exactly what gives it the power to expose the evil of the Roman system. And that critique isn't vague. Bauckham shows that John is making incredibly precise and accurate references to the political idolatry and the economic exploitation that was just part of daily life in the Roman province of Asia at that time. So understanding the history is absolutely essential. Okay, so now we have our 4 keys in hand: the literary artistry, the Old Testament dialogue, the apocalyptic tradition, and the Roman context. With these, we can finally unlock the door to the very heart of Baukham's entire argument, the ultimate purpose of John's prophecy, the secret that was hidden in that sealed book that only the Lamb was worthy to open. This is the question the whole book is built to answer. The Old Testament prophets talked about 2 big things that were going to happen. 1, that God's people would be oppressed, and 2, that eventually all the nations of the world would turn to God. But the question was always, how do those 2 things connect? What's the link between them? And here it is. This is the big reveal. The secret that the Lamb's book reveals is that the conversion of the nations is the consequence of the suffering of God's people. In other words, it's through the faithful witness of the church, even when it's facing brutal opposition, that God's kingdom ultimately wins and draws everyone to himself. And what this does is it completely flips the script on the whole holy war idea that was so common in this kind of literature. John takes that expectation of a huge messianic battle and he totally transforms it. Victory isn't won with swords and spears, it's won by following the path of the Lamb, through faithful witness to the truth, even if it leads to death. Martyrdom, not military might, becomes the weapon of conquest. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with this incredibly powerful shift in perspective. If Baukham's right, then the book of Revelation is not primarily some cryptic roadmap for predicting future events. It's not about decoding timelines or trying to figure out who the Antichrist is. Instead, it becomes this profound manual for the church in every single generation, a call for how to live and act right now, in the present, a call to courageous, nonviolent, suffering witness as the way God makes his justice and his rule known in the world.